welcome to another episode of Menu Combat, the episode for JRPG fans who love to pause and customize their party. I'm your host, The Wolves Den, and you can find me at TheWolvesDen25 on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, and you can find Menu Combat also at Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. And today, as you can see, this week is a solo episode. And so I've been trying to decide what I wanted to talk about because I've played a couple of things in my off time preparing for season 3. But I'm just going to jump straight into it. Let us talk about Final Fantasy VII. And that's your answer. What have I been grinding on? Final Fantasy VII. I am now at disc 3 of Final Fantasy VII. And I have to say, this has been something else. I've been sitting down talking with other friends about what this experience of Final Fantasy VII has meant, what has stood out, what makes it very different from the others. And I think there's so many places I want to go, but I want to start here. This might be the first time where I understand folks who are anti-turn-based and Final Fantasy fans, where they're coming from. I love turn-based combat. And in particular, I still like 9 more than I do 7 right now. And I think that's based, unless something crazy happens at the end of disc 3, I think that's how I'll end it. But I think the thing that stands out with FF7, obviously is the beginning of your 3D take, but it is so many set piece oriented experiences that not that you forget it's turn-based, that's not what I'm saying, but it becomes about those experiences becoming the cultural touchstone memories for people. I'm thinking about the bike scene at the end of Midgar. I'm talking about at the beginning of disc 2 going down with the snowboard, even going up and down the mountain and having to do those kind of mini games, even getting the huge material from Shinra 26. Like, it is all these kind of bigger than life time moments that it's not about the actual gameplay. Like, there's gameplay, don't maybe misconstrued, but it is so much about feeling grand, feeling epic, even stuff that they do that's really thoughtful. When you face off Weapon the second time, and so you have to travel across the ocean to Junon, stand there, or not Junon, right in front of Midgar, and you're just waiting to see crawling towards you. There's a sense of epicness that FF7 is trying to communicate. But if you are a person who subscribes to JRPG, turn-based is outdated, they've always been trying to go action, if your FF7 is your favorite, no wonder you believe this. It is so clear that this part of this game is about trying to communicate a sense of scale. And I think they do that wondrously. And I just want to start off with an acknowledgement of that. And then I want to double back on that and highlight that the turn-based element of this game is wholly unique. But I don't think I understood how materia really was supposed to work until end of disc 2. And it starts with 2 things. One, not grinding different material, because it felt like the AP was always so far out of reach to get like Bio 2, to get D-Barrier, to get all those other more stronger stuff. It felt like that's just so far away. I barely get anything in battle that hard to plan that out. And so I was lazy at the end of moments. 2, the tension between using weapons, stuff with material that could double or triple it, or using single because you'd have more. And I think this is where I started to realize that the chops of planning and creating around material is probably some of the most thoughtful design ethos that challenges at least a person like me to not rely on old ways of being. And old ways of being is not the best way to put it, but I feel like I've said it many times, learning skills through weapons is my preferred way of JRPG skilldom, or through job development. That the fact that you have to equip unequipped material make decisions around which material you want to place, and then obviously towards the end of the game, the drawbacks of certain material start materializing, pun intended, some unique challenges. All right, so let me try to put this into more specifics. Take for example, I would have wanted one predominant caster in this, or one predominant summoner, right? You have a bunch of different summons, and I'm like, oh, let me put Bahamut, Neo Bahamut, Bahamut type 0, place Ifrit, Shiva, place them all on one character, and I'm look at the HP just plummet. And at the beginning of the game, because you're not necessarily trying to operate in that framework, you're like, okay, this doesn't do it. But I realized, I noticed towards the second half of this too, I was just like, oh, I can't be greedy. I will be punished for being greedy. This idea that I will always have all magic and all summons available to me at every time is not a good strategy, because that character will be penalized. And what I noticed, I was trying to use Tifa as my caster in a post-Eris world, and she just couldn't deal with it. And I think that's when I was like, oh, I have to strategize and make plans and make sacrifices and make decisions about, like, okay, what's the magic that gets me through? Okay, what's the summons that will get me through? And I noticed I really started leaning towards, all right, you could only really have a summon and Ultima. You could only have a summon and this. I had to like demarcate and be less greedy and less overall with the idea that I'd have everything at all at once. It's just not how this game works. And then I felt like towards later, where I wanted higher level cures, higher level barriers, higher level destruct, I'm like, okay, well, now I need to equip something that is weaker, a bangle that's weaker, but gives me more XP for the long run. Or, as best example, one of the items that Sid gets you triple at the end of the Junon underwater thing. And I had to decide, all right, am I going to run with that, where you only can run 2 material, or am I going to run with normal but have a little bit more flexibility? And I think that level of choice and sacrifice and really deciding what matters is when I started understanding that the skill of the game is very different. Also, the fact that nowhere, let me rephrase that, not nowhere, it felt like it wasn't guaranteed I would find material to be sold. Right, the beginning of the game does a good job of making sure you can buy lightning, you can buy a couple of things, and then you start running out of money pretty quickly. And so you can't buy everything. And then by the time in Disc 2, which I'll talk about later, where about destruction of different towns, or you lose access to material, you're like, did I lose my only shot at this? Did I? And then I realized there are places I didn't properly explore. Here's a good example. Someplace, I did not realize in Junon that when you go to the surface, there's a shop there. And that was the only way I was going to get life and revive. Because I've been playing up until basically after Fort Condor, when you get the huge material. I'm like, I ain't get nothing to revive people? Like, that felt bizarre. And noticing that, oh, there are more places, and then there are a lot of places that shut down, or a lot of places that change what material you have based on disc transfers. And I'm like, yo. And I now notice that I would have played this game very differently from the beginning had I had a much more deeper understanding of how material worked. But it's just one of those things where I had to get out of my own head, where I have everything, and more so of like choosing, and it's not builds. That's the most other interesting thing, right? I feel like, oh, I'm building a character in a certain way. I'm like, you are, but you aren't. And I also know that for me, I spent Disc 1 really relying on Eris as my caster, and noticing that I have to shift out of that partially when she's gone, obviously. It made me recontextualize and look at what the material has and what people's stats are and how to make sense of them. And just knowing that even if you have the best material, you have to choose. That is some of the most thoughtful pausing and customizing. And shout outs to the person on GameFAQs who told you you do not have to re-equip and unequip individually all the time if you want to switch out a party member. You can go into the material page And if you click arrange, you can wholesalely transfer to another person because you can see how many slots they have. Oh my gosh, that changes the entire game. And that if I were to replay this from the beginning, that's what I would use, because it also gets me to use different players, use different like, it is wholly impressive and really thoughtful the way in which that they deal with materia. And I'm not gonna lie to you, this gives a sphere grid a good run for the money. I'm still leaning sphere grid. That's still my preferred level upgrading, and I still prefer 9, but it isn't by much. It's one of those things where this is really clever. And I really do think being able, at first where I'm like, oh, I can't always cast all, or having to modify things, it's just such, it is brilliant that you can modify the effects of your things. It's very flexible, right? Like you can have MP absorb, HP absorb, steal as you will, all different, like I had a point where I connected sense, which is to figure out everything about an enemy, and connect it to steal as well. And that gave me the flexibility of like, I always want to know how much HP I have, and that gives me the ability to do this other act that I don't always do. Or I'm gonna cast comment and use this as a way to steal MP absorb from the enemy. Like, or added effect where I ended up attaching poison to Barrett and added effect, so his gun would do that. And the fact that you actually have to deliberately choose between your armor as the added effect or the weapon as your added, it is actually really more detailed in ways that I vastly underrated. And I think it didn't always work the way I thought until I realized the effect of an armor versus the effect of a weapon with added effect as a materia is going to be different. I'm thinking that if I have ice as an added effect on my weapon, it's going to do a certain thing. But ice as an added effect on my armor means you can absorb. It's meticulous, it's thoughtful, it's deep. It is, I don't know. The more I talk about it, I'm like, this might, this is better than the sphere grid, and this is better than learning from weapons. It's close. I'm not gonna front on you. I think the more I've grown to understand it, and I didn't get all the material, right? I'm wondering in a world where I went to get more material, how I'd even feel more about this. So there are so many places I can go with FF7. I think the next thing I want to talk about is world design and world exploration. And I get it. I'm not a world, if you told me before FF7, if I cared about world maps, the answer is no. 9 was my real experience of like, oh, trying to trust a world map, but I didn't care. 7 is the first time where I'm like, oh, I get it. And it made me understand something about RPGs I'd never really put together before until 7. Because I'm like, oh, this is a classic technique, which is that you do so much of your journey on foot or in some limited ways. And then the second half of the game or the last third of the game is to give you the ship or the vessel that allows you to see everywhere afterwards. And then you treat that second run as like true puzzle exploration, true like mystery solving, that kind of approach. And it's through the intimacy of exploration on feet that you do first. And I take that for granted so many times. And I think 7's journey to explore and go around is interesting. Like, let's give you a really solid example. When you go to Rocket Town and you finally get the little ship, not the airship, but like the ship that's on the water, that is a whole segment of the game where the world opens up and you have choices to make. And I remember telling myself, I'm like, okay, I want to trust the game will guide me in directions that it's going to position me in a way that I will find where to go. I don't want to look at a guide at this moment. I want to trust the experience. And I got my ass whooped in Wutai. I didn't realize that's where I was going first, but I went to Wutai area, I went across the bridges, and I just got mollywopped. And I didn't save when I got on the other side, so I had to go back, do the fight in Rocket Town all over again. And it was frustrating. But the second time I came out of that, and I went in a different direction, because I was like, it ain't Wutai I'm supposed to go to. I bumped into Bone Village, and Bone Village literally just starts giving you the hints of like, oh yeah, the ancient temple is in this direction. Oh yeah, this person who has a key went to the golden saucer. Like literally, there are not many places on the map you can go to in the shallow waters. You go there, they tell you that, and you begin to like trust that, oh, the world is well designed, that I can piece together the puzzle of exploration. And that kind of trust is something that I always have to go back to and embrace. And I enjoyed that for 7. I think 7 does that not always perfectly, but it is very impressive when they do it, when they lean into it. I would say that same thing with Medial, right? I don't know if everyone remembers Medial. Medial is where you find Cloud. But I decided that once I got the high wind, I'm like, I'm gonna just go places I haven't been. And so you find the chocobo, little green chocobo in the ice place. You find, in this case, you find Medial, and you're like, oh, what's here? I mean, you start seeing the weapons. You're like, oh, this is a real place. And I start buying stuff. And then it triggers everything with Cloud and Tifa, and it's incredible. I didn't see that coming. There's a lot of feelings in that space. But what I noticed afterwards, because they send you to Fort Condor, they send you to Mount Cornet, or not Cornet, Cornell. And when you start going back to other places, go back to the Icicle place, you go back to Rocket Town, you go back to a couple places because you're just doing general exploration. They're like, there's a place called Medial. There's a place called Medial. And I think that kind of build up of like, hey, if you really just explore the world, they will have the guidelines to try to push you in certain directions. And if you're willing to trust the world to tell you the things and you're just willing to put in the work to explore, you're most likely going to get something. Now, does that mean that FF7 is always good at this? No. And maybe I'm wrong here. I'm open to people telling me that, oh, you're tripping. But I think a lot about the moment in FF7 about the underwater submarine getting the key to the ancients. And I'm like, when I went to the Forgotten Capital with the guy from Cosmo Canyon, and he's like, yeah, find the key to the music box. I'm like, that would have been your explanation. That would have been your clue. And maybe there would have been more because I did it before. But I'm like, that feels so nebulous. And they have a couple of moments like that. I'm thinking about the experience with trying to get the huge material out of Rocket 26, and you just have to put in button combinations, and all Sid can tell you is like, one of them repeats, and that's all he gives you in 3 minutes. Like, 7 goes back and forth between really well described, really well executed, and a really meaningful world, and a sense of place. And then other times it's just like, good luck with that. Like, the Lunar Harp, oh my gosh. I'm thinking about that a lot. The people in Bone Village tell you about the Lunar Harp, and they're like, look, if you just go here, you'll get the Lunar Harp, and now if you do the dig, you'll do the Lunar Harp, and that'll help you get through the forest, and that's cool. I'm like, okay, cool, you've expelled it out. But that digging minigame makes very little sense until I figured out what people were telling you about the eyesight of where people are pointing. I'm just like, nothing here makes sense. And so sometimes when I trust the game, I'm like, ooh, this is design, this is excellent, and I just need to be more ambitious. And then other times I'm just like, family. Mr. Sakaguchi, what were you trying to convey? It is so interesting of a game. And I don't know. It is fascinating to reflect upon and make sense of. I mean, I guess the other thing I'll say is the storytelling, right? There's so many things I can highlight, but I'll just highlight the big twists, right? Everything executed for the death of Eris is as impeccable as it's ever been. It is one of those things I'm like, it's clear why in the early 2000s, that's a mythological experience to people. Like that, as again, that's the most spoiled thing in video gaming history, and it's rightfully so. The build up in the Temple of the Ancients, what Cave Sif says and how he turns his face away from you, the the thing that happens where you're attacking her after the black material gets stolen and how painful that is for Cloud. Like, it is just genuinely heartbreaking, and the sense of loss for a character, it is executed at a high level. I know that emotionally I wasn't moved, and that's funny. I wanted to think of other Final Fantasy deaths or other Square or Square Enix deaths and how those are conveyed. And I kept on thinking of Final Fantasy V and Galuf and how they wanted to convey that death through the act of combat. Right? Galuf's death is in the middle of a boss fight with Gilgamesh, and it's incredible, and you feel that wear and tear. They didn't take advantage of that for this. In fact, they kill her before your battle, and you have to sit with that pain very differently, but you don't get to stew in it. It's kind of like, it happens, move on. And it is fascinating to see them play around with that. I think both in the sense of her flirtiness with you. I think the golden saucer stuff does a lot to build her up, right? Like, I'm sure that the way that the game is set up, but that's likely to be most people's first playthrough to get a date with her. And where she says, I'm looking for you. There's a lot of really strong moments, and it's impeccable storytelling. I was impressed. You know what? The second piece I wanted to make a comparison to is what they do with Cloud, and what that makes me think of what they do with Chrono and Chrono Trigger. Right? So when you go to Medieval and you deal with Cloud being basically not himself, he's out for the count, and you basically have a few hours where it's just you, no Tifa, no Cloud, and it's just the rest of the cast. And I'm like, how much are they trying to pull the Chrono Trigger thing where, like, you lose Chrono and you have to do this whole side quest to get him back? And then so it's like you're just relying on the rest of the party. I'm like, I wonder if those deliberate comparisons are there. I'm even thinking about the other thing with Cloud, which is his memory flashback, and how that gave me some Earthbound vibes. If you remember the area where you're going almost into your own subconscious, very similar. Very different in the sense of that you are doing it as a character in Earthbound and going through your own self-actualization. And obviously people aren't all surrogates for you, but you do have like representations of your will. Versus in here, it is Tifa going into Cloud's memory to help him re-piece himself. But I just found it very interesting thinking about going into characters' subconsciousness as a classic RPG thing. And it's extremely memorable here. And the reveal was more complicated. I've been thinking about that a lot, where, okay, what does any of what just happened mean, right? So the reveal for FF7 is that, yes, Cloud was a clone, but not a clone because he was there at the beginning. He's just that he connected his memory onto Zack's memory, and Tifa would not tell the truth. But the Genova cells are still inside Cloud in a way. And it's so fascinating to see that. And what's cool is seeing how they replay the same cutscene like 3 different times with 3 different meanings, right? You have it the first time in the Ghost of Nibelheim memory. Then you have the second time with Sephiroth showing. And then you have the third time with the actual truth. And it changes the context of certain of the guard that you've seen throughout, right? Because they always make it very clear that he's always there. It just makes the clone stuff a little bit more confusing for me. Because it's like, well, I'm not a perfect clone. And so I think one of the things I've been trying to piece together is like, is every soldier a Genova construction? Like, is everybody? Because when they talk about Genova reunion, I'm like, okay, what do we really even mean? Secondarily, I'm like, is there Sephiroth as an apparition and then Sephiroth the actual body? This is where I have to be honest. More confusing, even with the reveals than where we left off, right? Because I'll place it where my head has been at, right? Shinra is a corporation that is harnessing real-world resources into Mako energy, right? Which is very nuclear reactor and concept. And then if they condense that Mako reactor, you create materia. And they're doing it just for their own sake. Sephiroth is now trying to recreate himself because he's Genova's child. But he's technically Hojo's child because Hojo was pumped up on cells, pumped his wife with cells. Funny enough, that's the secondary piece I want to highlight. Everything that Sephiroth says to Cloud is true about himself. Fucking amazing when you piece that together. When Hojo's like, yeah, I distorted his sense of self through my wife and Genova. I'm like, wait, that's all the stuff that he's accused Cloud of. Genius. But it doesn't make it very clear what Genova is besides an ancient being trying to take over the earth. This is where I say the story of Final Fantasy VII is incredible, but I know that I'm going to clearly have to play the remake to put all these pieces accurately together. I will say that I've enjoyed the characters, but there's not much here, and so I am fine with gesturing at people's emotions. I think it's very clear this is a Cloud and Tifa story. But nobody else really holds any long-term weight. Like, yes, is Red 13 also an experiment? Besides Cosmo Canyon, does he hold any significance for the story? No. Does Sid hold any significance for the story? All that you have are influences of Shinra affecting people's lives, which I think tells the larger story, right? You live in Midgar, the way that people are segregated, the way that people are treated, barely in poverty and being resources used in particular ways. So it is very clearly the negative impact on Shinra. But I think what's interesting, and the game does it, is that through Rude, Reno, and Elena, they try to humanize Shinra because of their connection back to Sephiroth. And I think what I need to do when I replay the game or start playing Remake is making a better sense of connection about Sephiroth's connection outside of Hojo to Shinra, because he was a soldier, right? And so there's that connection back and forth. It's a very interesting story, but if I'm just going to be honest with y'all, did it all register? Even though I've gone back through my screenshots, gone back through my notes, I'm like, I have bits and pieces, but not everything all together. I think the ancient stuff is what's fascinating, right? Like, there's this ancient civilization that used to exist, and the Forgotten Capital is where they lived. I think some more ruins of the Forgotten Capital highlight the civilization that Eris is from would have done great. I think they do a really good job in the Temple of Agents bumping into people who represent that, and then even seeing part of that at the Northern Crater. It's actually really impressive what they do in that way. Even just the way that you get particular weapons inside the Temple of Ancients, highlighting that none of these weapons use Mako energy because they don't use material, to highlight how they're in harmony with the earth. Big brain stuff, well designed, really thought. Like, there's so much here that they're just kicking at a high level that you're like, brothers, y'all were in your bag. This has been a fun game. Genuinely, I've enjoyed it a lot. I can't sit down and tell you that it's emotionally moved me the way that 9 has. But the more and more I talk about it, the more and more I think about how it's executed, I'm impressed. And maybe the failures of me not comprehending the full story yet. Again, I'm at the beginning of Disc 3. I'll probably knock that out sometime over the next few days. It's removed me, but I'm like, I've loved the boss battles now. I love the material system. I love the world exploration. I just think the very solo elements, the very set piece elements can be very frustrating. What do I mean by that? So I'm thinking about this, right? This 2 opens, you do the whole thing in the mountain. You don't go back to a city after Icicle Inn for a long time, which means to buy items, if you're under-leveled or anything like that, you're just kind of stuck there. And I was. I ended up grinding, doing what I have to do, but it made me feel like, oh man, if I knew that the journey would be long when they tell you, go get your map, go get all these things to get ready to go up that mountain. But you do that, you run out of items, and you have so many boss fights, and you're like, you're asked out, and it's frustrating. And then you have all of the being captured in Junon the second time around, where you're with Tifa and Barrett, they're captured and all of that. And you're like, bro, am I going to get some items? Can I re-equip get some new things, get some new weapons? Like, I was under leveled and under prepared for that. And I think this game often throws you in ways where it's like, man, if you didn't prepare at this time, you gotta make do. And I think that's why I'm saying, like, this is very much a set piece oriented experience. And I understand from a storytelling experience why this has stood out a lot. And so that's what I've been grinding on. What have I been reflecting on? Coming from this and on and off looking up some of the things for Final Fantasy, I've been trying to reflect on how much do I want to complete something in terms of how much do I think missed content bothers me. And I can't decide. So here's how I played the game. I wanted to make sure I got the characters I wanted, in the sense of I didn't miss out on Vincent, I didn't miss out on Yuffie. I got to make sure that I got all the characters. I felt like if I didn't get those two, I would have been frustrated and I would have not enjoyed this experience. So I made sure I looked it up to make sure how I got them. But do I really care that I miss out on limit breaks? Like, as long as my limit break does damage enough, right? Do I really care that I don't get all the limit breaks? Is it okay that I don't get limit break 4 for certain characters? Like, does that bother me? Not as much, because as long as I feel like I'm able to make do with what I have, I'm fine. And this goes across the board for the best items for characters. Right now, I got the best item for Barrett, but I didn't have to really do anything. It's just, he was in my party. I got the final thing before Hojo's battle. But am I going out of my way to go to, I forgot, the Sulcan ship? I'm not doing that. If I have to go so out of my way to get this special thing, I might do the stuff in Wutai, though, for Yuffie's special limit break. But the rest of the stuff, like, I can skip that, because as long as my characters do enough damage, as long as I feel like I have enough strategy, that's stuff that can help, but I don't need it. But here's an example where I got something I didn't realize I was getting, and I'm like, I would have been pissed if I didn't get that. And that's a Bahamut type 0, where if you get all 4 huge material and tell that to the guy from Cosmo Canyon, you were able to get the new version, and that has made life so much easier. But I can't imagine doing this part of the game without that. But I think that's been one of my interesting questions, because I feel pressed for time, because this is also like, I want to experience the game, but I don't need to 100% it. I'm like, I ain't doing any of the chocobo side quests. I couldn't give a hootenanny about trying to get all these chocobos. For what? Like, cool. I now know the world exploration through chocobos is interesting, right? Like, I go back to Icicle Inn and I'm noticing the patterns on the floor. I'm like, huh, what is it? Like, my brain is starting to piece it together. Same thing by the cave by Wuta. I'm like, ooh, what could I have done to get that? Like, I am now, because I've done world exploration, I'm appreciating that. But the work to do the chocobo races, the chocobo breed, I'm like, that is not work I want to do. And I will sacrifice that content because I'm doing all right. I'm sure if I felt like I wasn't doing all right, or I was losing something major, like a character, I would have been more frustrated and been forcing myself to do it. Which leads to my thing is, like, for RPGs of a particular era, I've been playing on and off a little bit of Tales of Symphonia, not a whole lot. And they talk about the things that you can miss. Same thing with something like Tales of Vesperia. Like, if you don't do things in a certain order, you miss out on content, you miss out on experiences. And I'm like, I'm good. I don't need that. Like, but I know that for many folks, it's like, no, I want everything. I want every content. I want to see it all. And I'm like, if I can get by through the experience fundamentally, reasonably well without certain things, with the exception of characters, I can get you. I don't need everyone's ultimate weapon. I don't need everyone's best thing, because I think that's not always in the spirit of the game. And I don't really care about that for side quests, right? I don't need to do every side quest to enjoy the game. I don't need that. Now, sometimes a game can incentivize you, but I think the best incentive thus far for me has been what Xenoblade 3 did, where they incentivized you through either getting more jobs, upgrading jobs, or you got story beats for characters that gave you a whole different contextual understanding. But I remember hearing certain things about Tyon. I'm like, this wasn't main story stuff for Tyon, and y'all were just gonna let this just chill and sit in the air. I feel like with Tales or even FF7, it's like, I don't get the greatest bangle, I don't get the greatest weapon, but I'm cool. I do think with Tales, I know that some mystic arts you have to do certain things, and that's where I feel like I lose something. But this desire to see everything, get all the content, I'm like, maybe if I was younger where I felt like I had to pull everything out of the game to experience it, but I'm trying to trust the game will convey enough. And sometimes I will commit to a side quest, but I want to trust it on its own without having to do the search, right? Like, I think outside of Final Fantasy VII, I don't know many games where you can't get the characters. Like, I'm curious how I'll play something like Suikoden, right? Where there's 108 characters. Same thing with Chrono Cross. Like, will I play those differently? Or will I trust the game on its own and feel okay missing things? Will I feel okay missing content? And I'm curious for you all, what makes you feel okay missing content, missing experiences? That's one of the challenging questions for me. But for me, it's with limited time, right? Like, I have to wait summer to do this podcast. I can't do everything. Characters just feel like the only type of content that is so major that I might have to give it a shot. And so I'm curious, when do you feel like you've missed out on something? When do you feel like you've wasted an experience? Like, I lost items. That's been my frustrating thing. I lost power-up items for Cloud, right? So, example, using Medieval, right? Medieval, if you finish all of Medieval, they do the whole destruction of Medieval through weapon, and then ultimately you have to deal with the fact of you no longer have all the crystal items. I didn't get upgrade Cloud by that point. I had to go make do with something from Icicle Inn. I hated that. That's one of the few times where I missed content, but it wasn't missed because I didn't know of it. I missed it because I had access to it and I didn't take advantage. I'm like, oh, I'll get Cloud later. I'll be all right. So those were some thoughts about missing content and this idea of trying to trust the game, that it'll give you enough to make do and not to be falling into classic JRPG syndrome. I have every item, I'll never use them. No, like, they give it to you to make do with your experience. And so that leads to, what have I been listening to? Or what is the Bard's Tale? And so it felt like I could go into the bag and talk about different music, but I've been playing Final Fantasy VII, and the legacy of Final Fantasy VII is so music oriented that not mentioning Aeris theme or the Forgotten Capital would have been a disservice. And I just want to talk about Aeris theme. It is beautiful and better in context. It is heartbreaking, but also partially triumphant. There's a moment, if I have it correctly, where at the beginning of Disc 3, you and all your party members are trying to talk about, like, what does it need to remember what you're fighting for beyond just saving the world. That saving the world is not enough. It has to be a thing. And he mentions Aeris, and you hear a little bit of that theme, and it's just like, beautiful. And then obviously how it plays out in Death, it's doing, I mean, it's this moment of where it's just a piano at the beginning, and then it switches over and it becomes a slightly triumphant theme. It's something else, man. It's triumphant but quaint. It's beautiful. And then you have the Forgotten Capital. Now, if anyone has been paying attention to my side series of sampling JRPG music from the top 25 JRPGs from Axe the Blood God, you know I flipped the Forgotten Capital theme. And so I have to mention it here. It is this menacing synth with the clock as a snare, and there's this orchestral swing. I mean, there's this pluck string in the back. It is just menacing, haunting, spine-tingling music. And generally, I love it. I love it. These two are the best songs from the OST. And I'm ready to say now, I haven't played all the Final Fantasies, but I'm like, this is up there to Zanarkand. This is up there with the mountain theme from FF5, like FF1 Prelude. Like, if you told me the best Final Fantasy tracks and both of these were in your list, I'm like, what am I going to say? Like, I do think this washes so much of the other music I've experienced. Like, I don't know if I'm picking an FF9 song compared to these two from 7. And I prefer 9 over 7 as a game, but I don't think musically anything in 9 stands up to the Forgotten Capital. No. Maybe that's probably a thing to do one of these days. Maybe you guys know someone who'd like to sit down and rank Final Fantasy songs and music. I'd love to do that. But that's been this week's episode of Menu Combat. I'm excited to finish Disc 3. I'll probably mention it very lightly, but it'll probably be on my socials, is where you'll hear me talking about the end of FF7 for me. And so again, this is Menu Combat, the podcast for JRPG fans who like to pause and customize their party. I'm your host, The Wolves Den. You can find me at The Wolves Den 25 on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and TikTok. And you can find the Menu Combat podcast itself at Menu Combat on Twitter, Blue Sky, and Instagram. I'm really grateful you chose to listen this week. Have a wonderful day. Peace.